Welcome to the Rational Rebels, where we challenge ideas and not the side they come from. My name's Justin, and today we're going to be talking about Mr. Donald Trump, or should I say President Donald Trump. More specifically, Trump's now infamous executive order that effectively bars citizens of Syria, Iraq, Iran, Libya, Yemen, Sudan, and Somalia from entering the United States for the next 90 days. It also suspends refugee admissions. Now, while you might think this issue has been talked to death by journalists far more qualified than us, I feel the need to address this topic regardless, because the dominant narrative coming from the left and even the center and even some people on the right is that this is a racist policy, and that's all there is to it. Now, of course, the White House, Trump and his staff are justifying the policy on national security grounds. And I think, regardless of the stance you take on which of those two should prevail in this sense, we should look at whether or not there's anything to this whole national security justification in the first place. So this video isn't actually going to take a stance on what sometimes is a necessary choice between national security and the idea of accepting refugees and for humanitarian concerns and whatnot. But in fact, I want to question this idea that banning citizens of these countries is actually an effective means of combating terrorism. I mean, according to Trump, the whole purpose of this order is to protect the American people from terrorist attacks by foreign nationals admitted to the United States. But upon a little investigation, there's not a whole lot to this idea that foreign nationals are the problem are the core issue when it comes to jihadist terrorism in the United States. So I'm going to be drawing upon an article that was published in the Wall Street Journal today. It's written by Felicia Schwartz and Ben Kesling, and I'll link it in the description below for all you who want to take a look. And essentially, this article compiled research from the New America Foundation, which really weakens Mr. Trump's argument that this policy is actually going to prevent terrorism within U.S. borders. Now, before someone calls me on it, I'm happy to admit that the New America Foundation, while proclaiming itself to be nonpartisan, has been criticized from the right as being left-leaning. It did receive State Department funding under the Obama administration. However, the numbers they put out in these studies are in keeping with a number of other sources, and so I'm willing to accept this data relatively confidently. Now, the numbers here are actually quite striking. So the New America Foundation compiled data to include those charged with conducting attacks, killed while executing attacks, or who have taken steps toward violence in the United States supporting terrorism. It does not include people charged with attempting to travel abroad for jihadist purposes, and it did not include the September 11th night attacks. However, the Wall Street Journal article has added those in. Now, the striking aspect of these numbers is this: 180 people were found to have been charged with jihadist terrorist-related crimes, or who died before being charged. And this is including and since September 11th. Now, Of these 180 people, 11 were identified as being from Syria, Iraq, Iran, Libya, Yemen, Sudan, and Somalia, the countries upon which this executive order bans citizens from entering the U.S. 11 of 180. Okay? Now, when you add in, well, that includes 9/11, but take 9/11 for an example. I believe 15 of the, I believe maybe 19, don't quote me on those numbers, but the majority of the attackers were from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, not subject to this ban. The next highest number comes from Pakistan, also not subject to this ban. In fact, 85% of all suspects who took steps toward terrorist-related violence, according to this data, since September 11th, were U.S. citizens or legal residents. So, what does this tell us about the national security argument? It tells us that the national security argument for this immigrant ban really has no bearing in the stats. And so, while you can argue rhetorically that this is meant to keep Americans safe and to protect the country from external threats, that claim just simply isn't backed up by the data. And, the White House has not provided any alternative statistics to indicate that they're working with different numbers. And not only do these numbers demonstrate that this policy is likely to have little to no effect on protecting Americans from foreign nationals attempting to execute jihadist terrorist plots within the U.S., but further, it's very well likely that this policy will actually make Americans less safe. Because if the majority of jihadist attacks inside the United States borders are conducted by U.S. residents or citizens, then this is a homegrown problem. Now, these citizens and permanent residents who are becoming radicalized are doing so within the United States, and it may very well be that their inspiration is coming from ISIS or Al Qaeda or other terrorist organizations throughout the Middle East, but it's coming from inside. And what's the best thing you can do to support homegrown radicalized terrorism? Alienate those people. Alienate those people within your country already that are on the fringe and make them feel like they're unwanted, like they're second class citizens, like they're being persecuted. And all of this is going to happen when you ban citizens from outside from these Muslim majority countries coming in, because it tells U.S. citizens and residents who have relatives in these countries, who maybe immigrated from these countries, that they're not wanted, that they're not American, that they're not part of the fabric of American society, and it's going to lead to isolation and alienation and may very well have the opposite impact. So, to wrap this up, look at the numbers. The media is often going to take this one side and one spin and latch onto that. The president's obviously going to have his rhetorical justifications, but it's too easy to accept the dichotomy between national security interests and openness and humanitarian concerns. This policy it doesn't even relate. It won't make Americans safer, and if anything, it'll have the exact opposite effect. Now, if you like this video, click the link and subscribe and like the video. And if you have any issues with what I have to say, or you in fact agree, just let us know in the comments below. And until then, we'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.